With Big Brother Canada 12 coming to a close, one intriguing point of discussion has reawakened within the Big Brother community: bitter juries. Whether a player rubbed the jury the wrong way through their gameplay or the overall makeup of a jury simply disliking a player, bitter juries are one of the most unfortunate deciding factors in determining the winner of Big Brother. While they may not occur every season, bitter juries certainly stand out in the grand scheme of things for their unprecedented impact on the legacy of players and seasons at large. Because of how rich of a history bitter juries have, I thought it would be fun to dig into the past and discuss the history of bitter juries across Big Brother, including Big Brother Canada. However, before we really get into it, I would like to clarify that when I say a bitter jury, I'm referring to when a significant portion or the majority of the jury is bitter against one or both of the finalists. It's evident that there are individual bitter jurors on nearly every single season of Big Brother, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the makeup of the jury is bitter. So while there are pretty notable instances of individual bitter jurors, such as Jeff in Big Brother 11 against Kevin and Jacost in Big Brother 16 against Derek, that doesn't necessarily mean the makeup of the jury is bitter. So with all of that preamble out of the way, it is the one and only RJ21 here, and let's talk about the history of bitter juries. The first instance of a bitter jury in Big Brother is, ironically enough, the very first season to feature a jury in Big Brother 2, where the jury was particularly bitter against Nicole. Now, this season's jury in particular should be taken with a grain of salt, considering how this jury was quite literally the very first jury in the history of Big Brother. So there was no sort of outstanding precedent for them to determine what was and wasn't deserving of being crowned the winner. However, that's not to say that the jury wasn't bitter, as there definitely was a significant portion of the jury that was bitter against Nicole, mostly due to her overly strategic gameplay and her edited TV portrayal, where she comes off as this very antagonistic figure that, when compared to Dr. Will, her fellow finalist, she simply did not have the same appeal to the jurors. Her perception with the house certainly didn't help either, as her very aggressive gameplay alongside Hardy definitely rubbed a lot of jurors the wrong way. Many of the jurors felt Nicole was an inauthentic player, with a lot of the relationships she built in-house feeling ingenuine and more like a formality to keep her allies in line. That, in tangent with the overall physical dominance her and Hardy displayed over the mid to late stages of this game, especially put off jurors, with most jurors not respecting how the two of them dictated the overall direction of the game.
I feel very manipulated. I felt that she played me for a sucker, and it worked well. To her advantage. At least with Will, I knew where Will was coming from at all times.
She needs to work on her controlling, her self-esteem, and how she feels about people in life. And so she got some things to work on with herself before she can be happy doing other things, because she got some stuff to work on.
A modern jury would have much more respect for their games, but the Big Brother 2 jury was simply not a fan. While most people would agree with the sentiment that Dr. Will was the rightful winner of Big Brother 2 for his ability to maneuver the social dynamics of the house from the bottom for nearly the entire game, we cannot deny how the jury's bitterness against Nicole certainly helped him solidify his win.
She won't get my vote.
Okay.
She will not get my vote.
Well,
you can't get one way, you get them another way. And she might still get it, but I'll feel good because it wasn't part of my vote.
The second instance of a bitter jury in Big Brother is during the very next season in Big Brother 3, where the jury was particularly bitter against Danielle Reyes. One important factor to note about this season and Big Brother 2 is the fact that the jury was not sequestered, meaning that once the evicted house guests left the Big Brother and returned to the normal life, they gained the opportunity to watch the episodes back and witness everything that happened in the house, including the house guests' diary room sessions. This is especially important, and what makes the Big Brother 3 jury bitter against Danielle is because of her diary room sessions about her fellow house guests. While Danielle played an unprecedented strategic game at the time, her strategy was overshadowed by her seemingly very negative and cocky demeanor in the diary room, constantly bashing and making fun of nearly everyone, such as calling Roddy the devil and making unforgivable comments like, "Whoopie doopie on a poopie, who cares?" If you can't tell by my demeanor, I really don't hold that much weight with these comments. I totally understand that they are insults, and the jurors targeted by these comments will take them personally, but it's pretty apparent that these comments are superficial and aren't genuine takes on who the person is. At the end of the day, they're just roasts and shouldn't be taken as if Danielle is making some sort of visceral personal attack. There is quite literally an entire character in the Big Brother universe dedicated to roasting the house guests that future players look forward to. So these roasts really should not be taken with any sort of weight. However, nonetheless, because of these diary room sessions, as well as the generally cutthroat nature of Danielle's game, the jury was very bitter against Danielle and would have never granted her the win. Fun fact, Danielle's loss this season is often credited as to why future seasons have a sequestered jury.
My personal problem is I don't like what Danielle did as far as the way she spoke about Roddy. I mean, I have a huge problem with that. I just think that calling someone the devil is disgusting.
The next instance of a bitter jury is once again in the very next season in Big Brother 4, where the jury was particularly bitter against both finalists in June and Allison. Both of these women are often praised as the pioneers of the floating strategy, a strategy in which house guests don't commit their loyalties to one side of the house over the other, but instead intentionally float to whichever side of the house is in power to strategically advance their position. This is not to be confused with coasting, as coasting is when a house guest does little to nothing in the game and simply exists as another body within the house. Now, because June and Allison were the first house guests to implement such a complex strategy, many of the jurors simply did not understand their gameplay and viewed it as being deceitful, untrustworthy, and maliciously manipulative. However, beyond that, each finalist had even more unique reasons as to why the jurors disliked them. The jurors did not like the fact that June got Allison to do all of her dirty work for her, instead of taking initiative herself by winning competitions, perceiving some of her gameplay as cowardly and riding Allison's coattails. In addition, June was a very polarizing presence within the house, as she was brutally honest with her fellow house guests, to the point where she made a lot of personal comments about them and who they were as people, but not in a joking, self-depriving manner like Danielle in the previous season. Her comments came off as personal attacks, and a lot of the jurors were hurt on a personal level by these comments. Keep in mind that this season's jury wasn't sequestered, meaning that the jurors didn't even get to see what June was saying about them in the diary room until finale. So all of the comments that they heard about themselves were either said to their faces or heard through the grapevine.
One of the reasons why I don't think June should win this game, because I felt that there were a lot of personal attacks.
June, she talks about everybody's personal life and cruel things.
June should not win this game because she let Allison do her dirty work for her. June never had to kick anybody out of the house.
While June made jurors bitter within the house, Allison made jurors bitter once they hit the jury house. Allison put on a bit of a facade within the season, acting like she was loyal to certain people and expressing remorse whenever she evicted people, when in reality she wasn't any of these things. With June, at least the house guests expected that sort of gameplay from her because of how seemingly intelligent she was. But with Allison, a lot of the jurors who were closer to Allison, such as Erica, felt especially hurt by her actions. Furthermore, some of her gameplay choices were definitely questionable in the eyes of the jurors, as they believed Allison used her body to gain an advantage in the game, kissing her way into power and setting the women's movement back about 50 years.
I did not use the powers of persuasion that Allison did. I did not kiss people. I did not crawl into bed with people. I didn't pack goodies for people while I was booting them out the door. I think that I am more deserving of holding the title of someone who is maybe more honest and more honorable and more deserving.
Ultimately, the jurors granted the win to June for being perceived as the lesser of two evils, but rest assured that the jurors probably would have unanimously voted for any pre-juror before they would have ever considered voting for either June or Allison.
It sucks we have to choose between these two, because they're both floaters, none of them were on our team.
Finally, the next instance of a bitter jury isn't in the very next season, but we instead hop forward a couple seasons to Big Brother 8, where the jury was once again bitter against both finalists in Evil Dick and Danielle. From very early on in the game, it was established that Dick and Danielle were a duo because of the Rivals twist, which saw 3 house guests have their supposed rival enter the house and play the game with them. In all honesty, this twist flopped hard when 2 of the 3 rivals were voted out in the first 2 weeks, but that's besides the point. In regards to the game, Dick and Danielle were in tandem step with one another throughout the entire game, constantly strategizing, building alliances, and winning competitions to eliminate their opposition. However, interestingly enough, it wasn't their gameplay that made the jury bitter, but it was instead their behavior within the house, with each house guest having very different reasonings. Dick was, as his name implies, a huge dick within the house, constantly going on tirades, attacking and belittling his fellow house guests to the point where it was genuinely difficult to live with him. Dick was actively cruel to his fellow house guests, but there was some strategic reasoning behind it. While a lot of his confrontations were just him genuinely hating his fellow house guests, he actively got into a lot of these fights to make himself a bigger target than Danielle, to protect her, so that in the unfortunate circumstance that they are sitting on the block together, Dick would be the one voted out for being a genuinely unlikable presence over Danielle.
Everyone here has been afflicted by a personal attack by Dick.
Nice tone to it, isn't it? Cigars, cigarettes, cocktails. So sad. Isn't it sad? And that's that. And that's that.
Danielle, on the other hand, did not have any strategic reasoning behind her behavior and was just simply a person in the house her fellow house guests heavily disliked. During Big Brother 8, Danielle entered the game at only 20 years old, making her one of only 2 house guests to ever play Big Brother under the 21-year-old age requirement. I personally think this plays a major factor into her behavior, as she simply just doesn't have the emotional regulatory skills she displays on her future appearances. In comparison to her fellow housemates, Danielle was emotionally immature, consistently getting into fights and demanding the floor, but then not standing her ground whenever the argument wasn't going her way, building this overall perception of her being a brat and a crybaby, just following in her father's footsteps.
What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with my dad? I'm talking about my dad! You guys take out everything he does on me!
You want to know why people don't? No. You want to know why people?
From me.
No.
Danielle was a sniveling little baby, a brat who rode her father's coattails.
Similarly to Big Brother 4, the Big Brother 8 jury crowned Dick the winner of Big Brother 8 for being perceived as the lesser of 2 evils, with a lot of help from Eric being America's player and being forced to campaign for Dick in the jury roundtable.
Oh my God, you guys, what are we gonna do? We have to pick between those two.
We're essentially choosing the lesser of 2 evils here.
By golly, it's either evil or evil spawn that's gonna win.
The next instance of a bitter jury is quite possibly one of the most famous occurrences of a bitter jury in Big Brother 14, where the jury was bitter against Dan Giesling, the runner-up of the season. I firmly believe that Dan's loss in Big Brother 14 is what repopularized the concept of a bitter jury since Danielle's loss in Big Brother 3, because Dan, at that point in time, played one of the most strategically aggressive and impressive games in the history of Big Brother, to the point where national headlines were praising Dan and some of the moves he was able to pull off, most notably Dan's funeral. Because of Dan's heightened public perception as the greatest Big Brother player of all time, the nation fully expected Dan to sweep a jury vote. So when he eventually lost in a 6-1 jury vote, the nation was crushed for Dan as they felt he was robbed of his second win. However, that sentiment was with the audience and the nation, and their perception of Dan starkly differs from the jury's perception of Dan.
The New York Post is calling Dan the best Big Brother player of all time. Entertainment Weekly is likening his epic Hail Mary to watching Paul Newman in The Sting or George Clooney in Ocean's 11.
As I stated before, Dan played one of the most strategically aggressive games in the history of Big Brother up until that point. As he says himself, he was up to his elbows in blood because he had betrayed nearly every single member of the jury. Going juror by juror, Dan controlled Ian during the double eviction via the Quack Pack to nominate Ashley and incidentally send her home. He was the sole reason Brittany was targeted and evicted through Dan's funeral. He made a final 2 deal with Frank and immediately turned his back on him the following week. Dan was the HOH who sent Joe home and never really had a good relationship with him in the first place. Dan wanted to keep Jen in the game, but ultimately sided with the Quack Pack when they started winning all of the competitions. Finally, he manipulated Danielle into taking him off the block so he could evict Shane, Danielle's season-long stalk romance. He lied and manipulated his way throughout the entire game, going as far as to swearing on the Bible to further convince others of his intentions. Despite how impressive Dan's display of gameplay was throughout the entire season, the jury took Dan's gameplay as personal attacks against themselves and their character, not respecting the profound and seemingly unnecessary lies he told throughout the game. Adding on to the fact that the newbie jurors did not want to reward any of the returning veterans a win, especially a former winner like Dan, and it was one perfect amalgamation of bitterness that created Dan's demise.
Why are Dan's lies worse than anybody else's?
Putting your hand on the Bible and swearing on the Bible is much worse than just saying, hey, I'm not going to vote for you or I am going to vote for you.
If Dan and Judas were in the final two, Dan might have my vote.
Okay.
Joe's proud of that one.
Might. That's a maybe.
This next season is often regarded as the most bitter jury in the history of Big Brother, in Big Brother 19, where the jury was very bitter against Paul Abrahamian, the eventual runner-up of the season. While most people usually don't respect bitter juries because the jurors are not basing their decision off of gameplay and solely on emotions, Big Brother 19 is an exception because of how poor Paul's jury management was. Paul is literally the poster child of what poor jury management looks like, as their poor management of relationships as house guests left the house, as well as the seemingly unnecessary amount of lies they told throughout the duration of the season, definitely rubbed a lot of jurors the wrong way. Paul undoubtedly played one of the most dominant games in the history of Big Brother, as they dictated literally everything in the house, and that's not meant to be an exaggeration. Paul literally formed a cult-like following within the house, to where nearly everyone was willing to give up their own games and chances at winning if it meant appeasing Paul and their demands. People were blindly under Paul's mist and were undyingly loyal to them within the house, causing Paul to serve as the dominant social and strategic force within the house. However, as soon as the house guests were evicted and entered the jury house, Paul's mist wore off, and they realized how badly Paul played them, and to put it in layman's terms, they were a bunch of sore losers and couldn't cope with the fact that Paul outplayed them in every way possible. Jurors like Elena, Mark, Jason, and Alex were especially bitter at Paul because of how cutthroat their gameplay was and how seemingly ruthless they were in the game, cutting anybody that stood in the way of them getting to the end, which definitely did not resonate well with them.
I think he overplayed.
He overlied. It was uncalled for. It was just overplayed.
There's such a thing as bitter juror, and I'm a bitter juror.
However, this bitterness does not reside with just Paul's gameplay, as it extends to their actions within the house as well. Remember how I mentioned Paul built a cult-like following within the house? Well, unfortunately, this did not remain on only a strategic level, as Paul utilized their influence over the house to consistently antagonize and outright bully the outsiders who weren't in their power structure, primarily Jessica and Cody. Paul orchestrated, elicited, and enabled a lot of the bullying tactics throughout the season, to the point where it became absolutely painful to attempt to rewatch the season. Needless to say, this definitely did not boost Paul's jury chances, as one of the victims of Paul's bullying antics in Cody and Cody's close friends in Elena and Mark were essentially the deciding votes that lost Paul the game.
Regardless of how Cody has acted in this game, this is harassment. It's pathetic, and it's bullying.
He's trying to make it a personal attack by making sure that every player feels belittled by him. He did things that were hurtful and crossed the line that I am determining as a jury member. Some of us in the jury feel that you orchestrated and participated in bullying tactics in the house. Why was that necessary, and how did it serve your game?
The next and currently final instance of a bitter jury in the US version of Big Brother is Big Brother 20, where the jury was bitter against Tyler Crispin, the eventual runner-up of the season. The most interesting part of the Big Brother 20 jury is that there isn't one unifying reason as to why the jury was bitter, but instead, each individual juror had their own reasons for being bitter. The main culprits of bitterness are the members of the Faute Alliance, excluding Fessy and Haley and Sam. Bailey's bitterness is honestly the most justifiable because Bailey and Tyler did not get along with each other on a game level, and Tyler definitely didn't do himself any favors with how he treated Bailey on her way out.
You are terrible! You've made my life into something hell! You are
anything to you, Bailey! Oh my god, how did that get so far?
In regards to Rockstar's jury vote, I have heard conflicting arguments about her bitterness towards Tyler. Some people argue that Rockstar simply respected Casey's social game a lot more than Tyler's strategic game, which is understandable and completely justifiable, but others have claimed that Rockstar's jury vote was on the basis of identity politics, in that Casey represented more being a Filipino lesbian, as opposed to Tyler being a white man. However, I am a little hesitant to fully trust this information, as this was during 2018 when people were still unwilling to accept the changes made in the overall social climate and the whole anti-woke sentiment was reigning supreme. So I definitely take this whole identity politics sentiment with a grain of salt. While it is in character for somebody like Rockstar, I'm still a little hesitant to believe it. But nonetheless, it's fair to say Rockstar was never voting for Tyler to win. Scotty was bitter against Tyler for mostly gameplay reasons. Tyler played Scotty hard throughout the season, stringing him along as a pawn until he was no longer necessary. This did not leave the best impression with Scotty, as Scotty perceived Tyler as the Paul of the season, dictating all of the action throughout the whole season. Because of this,
He played like a lot of the people here, like including me, but this whole time he was like making moves that I had no idea existed.
Scotty wanted to act as the hero and didn't want to reward Tyler's gameplay, which is why he voted for Casey to win. While I don't personally think Fessel's jury vote was bitter, a lot of people do, which is why I'm still mentioning it here. Fessel voted for Casey because Casey won the veto competition that sent him home, and as a competitor, he respects that about Casey, which is why he voted for her. However, Tyler didn't even get to play in that veto competition in the first place, so there was no way for Tyler to gain Fessel's jury vote in the first place, which is why many people perceived his jury vote as being bitter. After seeing Fessel's performance on the challenge and how he conducts himself in recent seasons, I definitely don't think Fessel was bitter, as that simply just seems like the type of person he is. Finally, Sam voted on entirely personal reasons. Sam was a very emotional player throughout the whole season, and she casted her jury vote as such. Sam didn't base her jury vote off of any sort of gameplay whatsoever, but instead voted on who needed the money the most. She perceived Casey as more needing of the money than Tyler, and that is why she voted for Casey to win. However, despite this pretty valid reasoning, I can't help feel like there is a tinge of bitterness in Sam's jury vote, as Sam was undyingly loyal to Tyler, but then found out within the jury roundtable that Tyler had multiple final twos in the game, which definitely hurt her on a personal level. Overall, while there were numerous different reasons as to why each of the jurors were bitter, it's fairly clear that the jury was bitter against Tyler, resulting in his loss by a jury vote of 5-4.
Tyler and I made a final two on day 3.
You were a day late.
Fun fact, a lot of super fans of Big Brother often consider Big Brother 20 as the end of bitter juries in Big Brother US, as Tyler was the fan favorite of the season, and many people believe that he deserved to be the winner. So, when he lost the season to a bitter jury directly after Paul lost their season to a bitter jury, future juries silently agreed that their jury votes should be mostly based on gameplay.
He's a little punk. Yeah.
Let's now move across the border into Big Brother Canada, where the juries typically respect gameplay more because of how big of fans the house guests typically are. But this doesn't make them exempt from the occasional bitter jury. The first instance of a bitter jury in Big Brother Canada is, ironically enough, the first season of Big Brother Canada, where the jury was especially bitter against Jillian. To put it bluntly, the first 4 jurors in AJ, Alec, Topaz, and Peter were extremely bitter against Emmett and Jillian because they perceived Emmett and Jillian being lower than them. So the sentiment of Emmett and Jillian outplaying them hard made them very sore losers. They didn't want to face the reality that Emmett and Jillian played a better game than them. However, they were more bitter at Jillian than Emmett because they at least respected the fact that Emmett was out in front and making the moves for the duo, perceiving Jillian as riding Emmett's coattails to the end, winning competitions to advance Emmett's game further and not her own. It got so bad to the point where the first 4 jurors made a jury pact to ensure Jillian loses against anyone in the finale. However, karma would have the last say, as Topaz's miscasted jury vote for Jillian was ultimately what gave Jillian the win over Gary, Topaz's literal best friend in the game. It almost feels scripted with how absurd the situation was, but karma has a weird way of working sometimes.
Wait a minute. Wait, what?
Topaz.
Yeah?
We made the rules really, really clear.
No!
You vote.
No, wait a minute. No!
You vote for who you want to win. I'm so sorry, but the votes are final.
The latest instance of a bitter jury is the most recent season in Big Brother Canada 12, where the jury was immensely bitter against Anthony. Actually, the more appropriate assessment of the BB Can 12 jury is that Victoria was very bitter against Anthony. Victoria's venom quickly rooted itself within the makeup of the jury, and it spread to a majority of the jurors, particularly Kayla, Avery, and surprisingly Tola. Victoria claimed to be loyal to Anthony throughout the entire season, despite there being multiple points in which Victoria was actively making moves to ruin Anthony's position and strengthen her own, even planting seeds of doubt about how big of a jury threat Anthony was going to be in the endgame and that he needs to be taken out. Victoria was so encompassed by her own delusions to the point where she genuinely believes that she was never making actions against Anthony and she was genuinely loyal to him. So when Anthony wins HOH and takes Victoria out, Victoria quickly spreads the sentiment of loyalty and remaining loyal to your allies within the jury, and this quickly clouds the jury's perception of Anthony's game. Victoria, Avery, and Kayla all criticize Anthony for being disloyal to the Hot Chocolate Alliance and being the reason why they broke out, when the three of them constantly talked about wanting to take Lexus out, with Avery literally targeting Lexus at one point during her HOH. Tola's bitterness stems from the fact that he didn't get a sympathy vote from Anthony to stay, and he perceived that as Anthony never being truly loyal to him. However, Tola has expressed his regrets post-season about his jury vote and how he was majorly influenced by Victoria within the jury house, but Tola was still bitter with his jury vote nonetheless. Ultimately, the bitterness of Victoria and those she could manipulate cost Anthony the game, as Anthony lost in a 6-1 jury vote.
What am I gonna do with this now? I was really hoping that Anthony was gonna walk out here so I could give him a trash bag so he could learn some loyalty, because a trash bag at least holds what they say it's gonna hold.
Despite how much the Big Brother community hates bitter juries because of how they can rob the perceivably more deserving player from being crowned the winner, bitter juries are an element of the game that players and fans alike have to be aware of due to their drastic ramifications on the outcome of the game. While it is an interesting topic to talk about, I personally hope we don't see any bitter juries in the near future because of how they take away from the gameplay aspect of Big Brother as a whole. But those are just my thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you have any of those, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.
You know, being a piece of is great, and it'll win you $500,000.